Surely mom and dad would want to live with me rather than you, Emma, since you can't even give them grandkids. We're moving in here, so you and your husband should move out already. That's what my pregnant sister-in-law, Karen, said while patting her growing belly. She seemed pleased when I simply replied, all right, but deep down, I felt relieved. This might finally help us cut ties. My name is Emma, I'm married to Scott, and together we've been trying to deal with infertility. I used to work as a childcare worker and have always loved children, but after getting married, I learned I had trouble conceiving. It was a huge shock. I even told Scott that if he regretted marrying someone like me, I would understand if he wanted a divorce. But Scott, being the kind person he is, told me, I didn't marry you just to have kids. I married you because I love you. If having a baby is hard, let's face this challenge together. Hearing this, we decided to start fertility treatments. I often remind myself how lucky I am to have such an amazing husband. At first, I tried balancing the treatments with my job, but it became too overwhelming. My work shifts didn't match well with my appointments, and I grew emotionally sensitive. Sometimes, I'd see little kids and cry, thinking I might never have a child of my own. Not wanting to be a burden at work, and remembering Scott had once said I could stay home if I wanted, I decided to quit my job. Now, I'm a full-time housewife focusing on our fertility journey. Scott's younger sister, Karen, knows about our struggles. She already has 4 kids and is pregnant with her 5th. Seeing pregnant women is hard for me, but Karen doesn't seem to care. She often visits with her kids and says things like, Emma, you're a housewife now, right? Why don't you watch my kids for me? It's hard managing all of them by myself. You used to be a childcare worker, so this should be easy for you. Karen would leave her 4 kids with me while she went out for beauty treatments and manicures. When I told her I couldn't keep doing this, she'd say things like, in a society where people aren't having enough kids, I'm obviously more admirable because I'm raising children. You, who can't even have kids, should just do as I say. It was frustrating to babysit her children for free, even though she was my sister-in-law. On top of that, Karen's attitude was condescending, but what hurt me the most was seeing how much her children wanted their mom's attention. They'd often ask me, when will mom be back? And it broke my heart to reply, I'm not sure. I told Scott about how Karen was dumping her kids on me while she spent her time at salons. Furious, Scott called Karen to confront her, but Karen brushed it off, saying, Emma should be glad to spend time with kids since she can't have any of her own. She used to work in childcare, so it's no big deal. Scott then spoke to Karen's husband, Rob, about the issue, but Rob sided with Karen, saying, our kids like spending time with Emma, and it's really helpful for us. If Emma gets pregnant, we won't ask her to babysit anymore, but until then, please help us out. Karen is exhausted from raising kids, and since Emma is a housewife, she should be able to help. Scott told me that if Karen ever came over, I could just send her away. But whenever she visited, her 4 kids would run straight to the back room without even saying hello. Karen would quickly say, well then, take care of them for today, and leave before I could protest. One day, Karen surprised me by actually coming into the house. Normally, she just drops her kids off and leaves, so I was caught off guard when she asked, when are you moving to the new house? Do you have any designs or something? Scott and I were building a new duplex to live with his parents. The house was nearly finished, and we were preparing to move. Despite my fertility struggles, my in-laws had never said a single negative thing to me. In fact, my mother-in-law once told me, there are plenty of happy families without children. Those words were a lifeline for me. As my in-laws were getting older and dealing with aches and pains, we decided to live together to help them before they required full-time care. So, Scott planned the duplex. It was unusual for Karen to show interest in the house, but I showed her the blueprints and images anyway. She seemed curious, asking about the number of rooms and how much sunlight the house got. I assured her everything was well planned. She also asked when we planned to move. When I told her, she simply said, I see, and left, once again leaving her kids behind. I felt uneasy about her sudden interest in the house, but didn't dwell on it at the time. Eventually, we moved into the duplex, and my in-laws joined us a few days later. Living together was smooth and peaceful, and I felt lucky to have such kind in-laws. Then, one day, Karen showed up unexpectedly, this time at the new house. Of course, she brought her 4 kids along. Without even glancing at them, she ushered them inside and turned to me. Hey, Emma, we need to talk, she said. While my in-laws were busy being overwhelmed by Karen's kids, Karen pulled me aside into the hallway. I couldn't help but worry about whether my in-laws, who often complained about back pain, could handle taking care of those energetic children. That's when Karen said something shocking. "Hey, why don't you and Scott leave this house?" I was stunned. I hadn't expected her to say something like that, but Karen continued, completely ignoring my reaction. "Surely Mom and Dad would rather live with me than with you, since you can't even give them a grandchild, and besides, I'm their real daughter by blood. We're moving in here, so you and Scott should move out soon." As she stroked her pregnant belly, Karen spoke with arrogance. It was clear her plan was to live with my in-laws and have them take care of her kids. She even pointed to my in-laws, saying, "Look how happy they are to take care of their grandkids." But all I saw were my poor in-laws struggling to keep up with the rowdy children. There wasn't a hint of joy on their faces. I knew arguing with Karen was pointless. She wouldn't listen. My anger had been building for a long time, not just because of her constant jabs about my infertility, but also because she was taking advantage of my kind in-laws. After thinking it over, I came up with an idea. So, I nodded quietly and said, "Okay, we'll move out." Karen was thrilled. She immediately set a schedule for when we would move out and her family would move in. Then, as usual, she left her kids behind and left, but I felt a sense of relief. This was my chance to cut ties with her. Time passed, and the day came when Karen and her family moved into the duplex. I wondered how their move was going when my phone rang. It was Karen. As soon as I answered, she started yelling, "What the hell is this? Why haven't you moved your stuff out? There's no room for our things. And where are Mom and Dad supposed to go?" Scott, his parents, and I had left the duplex, but we didn't take all the furniture with us. Karen was furious about this, and I calmly replied, "The move was so sudden, so we only left for now. Also, your in-laws are with us." Karen fired back angrily, "Outrageous." But I countered, "I think it's outrageous that you and your husband are moving into the house Scott built without our consent. It's also outrageous to force the kids on us while you go out and have fun, especially when we've told you how hard it is to take care of them." Karen dismissed my points, snapping, "That's not the issue right now. Can I just throw away any furniture I don't like?" I replied, "Feel free, if you're really planning to move in, but are you sure about this?" Confused, Karen asked, "What are you talking about?" That's when I revealed the truth, or rather, part of it. "Can you and your husband handle the mortgage for that house? It's a large two-family house, and it's quite expensive." Karen had no idea that the mortgage was just a lie. The house was fully paid for with the savings of Scott, his parents, and me, but the lie was enough to scare her. When Karen angrily demanded to speak with Scott, he played along. With a mischievous smile, he told her the same lie, that there was still a mortgage to pay. Over the phone, Karen apparently broke down in tears. She realized they couldn't afford the payments and decided to move back to her old home with her husband Rob and their kids. Scott reassured her that she could back out of the move and told her we would also be returning home. When we returned to the duplex, happy to have avoided Karen taking it over, she stormed in furiously, ready for another confrontation. Karen yelled at us, "You never told us there was still a mortgage. Why did you keep it from us?" I casually replied, "Because you never asked." Karen's face turned red with anger. She ranted, "The kids were so excited, thinking this house would be ours. You've disappointed them. That's why you can't get pregnant. You need to make up for it by properly taking care of the kids. Playing with them is no big deal. It's better than doing nothing." As Karen kept ranting, my usually quiet mother-in-law suddenly stood up and slapped her. Karen looked shocked, and so was I, since my mother-in-law was normally so calm. In a sharp tone, my mother-in-law said, "You can't even handle the no-big-deal task of playing with your kids and instead dump it on Emma. You wanted to move into this duplex just to force your parenting duties onto us, didn't you? I was willing to help if you were struggling to raise your children alone, but who would want to help a daughter who offloads her responsibilities onto others and acts so entitled? Leave this house immediately, and don't come back." Half crying, Karen pleaded, "Aren't you on my side, Mom? I'm your real daughter, aren't I?" My father-in-law, who was also normally quiet, spoke up sternly, "It's because you're our real daughter that this is so disgraceful. I feel ashamed to have raised such a selfish child. I've heard from Scott how you've been mocking Emma for her difficulty in having a baby. That's something no one should ever do." Karen glared at me furiously, but I felt a small pity for her. I opened the door and said, "As your parents have said, please leave. I don't intend to help with your childcare anymore, so please do your best." Karen burst into tears and shouted, "You people are monsters." Before leaving the house, She never returned after that. Later, Scott received a call from Karen while he was at work. She was sobbing so much that it was hard to understand her, but it seemed her family was already in serious financial trouble. Karen and her husband Rob had been careless with their money. Karen spent on beauty salons and manicures, while Rob wasted money on lottery tickets. When their savings ran out, Karen thought moving into the duplex Scott had built would save them from paying rent and utilities. When Karen asked Scott, who earns a good income, for financial help, he refused. He couldn't forgive her for mocking my infertility. He told her, just cut back on beauty treatments and lottery tickets. But Karen cried, saying she didn't want to. Scott couldn't bring himself to help someone so entitled, even if she was his sister. Eventually, Rob ran out of money for lottery tickets and had to take a side job to make ends meet. Karen, too, could no longer afford her beauty treatments. She used to look polished and put together, but when we bumped into her months later, she was almost unrecognizable. Scott even had to point out, "Isn't that Karen?" before I realized it was her. Despite everything, her kids seemed lively and happy around her, which was a relief. Now for the miracle part of the story. I found out I'm pregnant, with twins. I couldn't hold back my tears when the doctor told me, and Scott, who was with me, cried tears of joy too. We shared our happiness together, and my in-laws were thrilled to hear they'd finally have grandchildren. Though I haven't told Scott, I secretly believe being free from the stress Karen caused helped me get pregnant. I feel incredibly grateful for Scott and my in-laws, who supported me through everything. Their kindness and love have blessed me with 2 new lives. Now, I just hope from the bottom of my heart that my babies will be born healthy.